You won't believe what just happened. Shay O'Neill has finally caught Pastor Cian Henderson red-handed, and the internet is losing its mind. The news sent shock waves through social media, leaving fans stunned, speechless, and emotionally shaken. But here is the shocking part: no one saw it coming. This wasn't just another celebrity scandal. It was a revelation that shattered the image of a seemingly perfect relationship. Shay O'Neill, known for her strength, grace, and resilience, is facing the kind of betrayal that no one could have ever imagined, and the way she discovered it, that's the part that will leave you speechless. Let me tell you, it all started so innocently. Shay didn't go looking for trouble. Trouble found her. It began with subtle changes in Pastor Cian's behavior. He became distant, distracted, and emotionally unavailable. At first she thought he was just busy or stressed. After all, being a prominent pastor and public figure comes with its own pressures. But then the small signs began to add up: missed calls, late nights, and vague explanations that didn't quite make sense. Shay tried to convince herself that it was nothing, that she was just overthinking, but deep down her intuition was screaming that something wasn't right. This is how it all unraveled. Shay began to notice inconsistencies, conversations that didn't add up, stories that kept changing, and moments of hesitation that made her question everything. She paid attention to every detail, every word, and every action. It was like putting together a puzzle where the pieces didn't quite fit. But here's where it gets interesting. Shay didn't confront him right away. She watched, listened, and observed. She wanted to be absolutely sure before she made any accusations, and the more she watched, the more the truth became undeniable. But here's the craziest part: Shay didn't find out the truth from someone else. She discovered it herself. It was during one of those moments when Pastor Cian thought she wasn't paying attention. A text message that popped up on his phone, a name she didn't recognize, and a conversation that was way too familiar to be just friendly. It was subtle, almost too subtle, but Shay caught it, and in that moment everything changed. Her heart sank, her mind raced, and her worst fears were confirmed. The man she trusted, loved, and believed in was hiding something from her. What makes this story different? It's the fact that Shaunie didn't react impulsively. She didn't scream, shout, or confront him right away. She played it cool, pretending that everything was fine. While she gathered more evidence, she became a detective in her own life, searching for the truth that was hidden in plain sight. But here is the most shocking part: what she found was more than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just one message, one conversation, or one lie. It was a series of secrets that shattered everything she thought she knew about Pastor Cian. The evidence was everywhere, hidden in his phone, his emails, and his social media. It was in the way he smiled at his phone, the way he guarded his messages, and the way he became defensive whenever she asked questions. Shay pieced it all together, connecting the dots that painted a picture of betrayal, deception, and heartbreak. But here is where destiny took an unexpected turn. Shay realized that this wasn't just about one mistake or one moment of weakness. It was a pattern, a habit, and a web of lies that had been building up for a long time. And the worst part, she never saw it coming. This is where it gets even more interesting. Shay didn't just sit back and accept the truth. She decided to confront it head on. She needed answers, explanations, and closure. But before she confronted Pastor Cian, she needed to be absolutely sure. So she kept digging, kept searching, and kept watching. And the more she searched, the more she found it wasn't just about infidelity. It was about betrayal on a deeper emotional level. It was about secrets, lies, and a double life that Pastor Cian was living right under her nose. But here is the craziest part. Shay found herself questioning everything. Was their love Even real was everything just a facade? And the hardest question of all, how could she have been so blind? It wasn't just about anger or betrayal, it was about heartbreak, disillusionment, and emotional devastation. Shaunie's world was falling apart and she was powerless to stop it, but even in her pain she found strength. She knew she had to confront Pastor Khan, not just for herself but for the truth that she deserved. This is how the shocking discovery changed everything. It wasn't just about catching someone red-handed. It was about facing a truth that was painful, heartbreaking, and impossible to ignore. It was about realizing that the person you loved, trusted, and believed in was living a lie. And as Shay prepared herself to confront Pastor Khan, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The truth was out, the evidence was undeniable, and the emotional fallout was just beginning. The discovery wasn't just shocking, it was devastating, emotional, and life-changing. It was about betrayal, heartbreak, and the painful journey of facing the truth. It was about Shaunie finding the strength to confront her worst fears, even when it shattered her heart. And as she braced herself for the confrontation, one thing was clear: the shocking discovery was just the beginning of a much bigger story. Let me tell you, this story didn't start with drama or confrontation. It began in the most subtle, almost unnoticeable way. Shay O'Neill and Pastor Con Henderson were the couple everyone admired. They seemed perfect, happy, successful, and deeply in love. Their relationship looked like a fairy tale, a romance built on trust, respect, and shared dreams. But here is the shocking part behind the smiles. There was a growing distance that no one could see. It all started with small changes. At first they were so subtle that Shay didn't even notice them. Pastor Khan became busier, more distracted, and less present. He started spending more time at work, more time on his phone, and less time at home. He became more guarded, locking his phone and taking his calls in private. When Shaunie asked about it, he brushed it off, saying it was just work-related, and she believed him. Why wouldn't she? He was a pastor, a man of faith, a person she trusted completely. But this is how it all began, with small changes that were too subtle to raise suspicion but too significant to be ignored. Then came the excuses. I'm working late, I have a meeting, I'm too tired. At first Shay didn't think much of it. She understood his busy schedule and trusted his intentions, but the excuses became more frequent, more elaborate, and more inconsistent. This is where it gets interesting. Shay began to notice contradictions in his stories. He would say he was at one place but later mention something that didn't match up. It was confusing, and Shay started feeling a strange sense of unease. She couldn't explain it, but something didn't feel right. You won't believe how it all started to unravel. One evening Shay was scrolling through social media when she noticed something odd. Pastor Khan was tagged in a post, nothing unusual except he had never mentioned being at that event. When she asked him about it, he hesitated, stumbling over his words before quickly changing the topic. Shaunie's heart sank, but she convinced herself that she was overreacting. After all, he was a public figure, constantly attending events and meetings, but that uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. It was the beginning of doubt, the first crack in the foundation of their trust. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Shay started paying closer attention. She watched his behavior, listened to his words, and observed his actions. She noticed how he guarded his phone, how he became defensive when she asked questions, and how he seemed emotionally distant. It was as if he was there but not really present. But the craziest part was how well he hid it. Pastor Khan was charming, affectionate, and attentive when he wanted to be. He made Shay feel loved, special, and important. And for a while that was enough to quiet her doubts. What makes this story Different is the way Shay tried to fight her suspicions she didn't want to believe that the man she loved could betray her. She blamed herself, questioning her own sanity and wondering if she was just being paranoid. She tried to push her doubts away, focusing on the good memories, the laughter and the love they shared. But destiny took an unexpected turn when the signs became too obvious to ignore. Shay couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and it was tearing her apart. The turning point came when Shay noticed a pattern every time she confronted him with a question. He became defensive, irritated and distant. He accused her of being insecure, paranoid and overly sensitive. He made her feel guilty for asking questions, and Shaw started to doubt herself even more. But here is the shocking part. She realized that his defensiveness was a sign of guilt. It was a strategy to deflect suspicion and manipulate her emotions. And once Shay realized this, everything started to make sense. This is how it all began, with subtle changes, clever manipulation and emotional gaslighting. Shay found herself trapped in a cycle of doubt, confusion and emotional pain. She was questioning everything: her instincts, her judgment and even her own sanity. She felt lost, broken and emotionally exhausted. But the craziest part was that she was still in love with him. She wanted to believe him, trust him and fight for their relationship. But the more she tried to ignore the truth, the more it haunted her. Destiny took another unexpected turn when Shay decided to search for the truth. She started paying attention to every detail, every message, every call and every word. She looked for clues, inconsistencies and hidden meanings. She was determined to find out the truth, no matter how painful it would be. But here is the most shocking part. What she found was more than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about infidelity, it was about deception on a deeper emotional level. It was about secrets, lies and betrayal that went far beyond her worst fears. This is where it gets even more emotional. Shay found herself at a crossroads. Should she confront him, walk away or try to fix what was broken? She was torn between love and betrayal, trust and doubt, hope and despair. She wanted to fight for their relationship, but she also wanted the truth. She was trapped in an emotional whirlwind, struggling to find a way out. And the hardest part, she was facing it all alone. The emotional pain was overwhelming, but it was also the beginning of her awakening. Shay realized that she deserved the truth. Even if it broke her heart, she was ready to face the lies, the secrets and the betrayal. She was ready to confront Pastor Khan and demand the truth. But here is the craziest part. She had no idea how deep the deception went. The shocking discovery was just the beginning, and the emotional fallout was far from over. This is how it all began, with love, trust and the heartbreaking realization that nothing was as it seemed. It was about a woman fighting for the truth even when it shattered her world. It was about betrayal, heartbreak and the emotional journey of facing the truth. And as Shay prepared herself to confront Pastor Khan, one thing was clear: the beginning was just the start of a much bigger story. You won't believe how the truth started to reveal itself. It wasn't through a dramatic confrontation or an explosive argument. No, it began with the smallest, seemingly insignificant clues, little things that would be easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. But Shay O'Neill was paying attention. Her intuition was on high alert, and the more she observed, the more the pieces didn't add up. This is how it all started to unravel. It began with the phone. Pastor Con Henderson became unusually protective of it. He used to leave it lying around the house without a second thought, but now it was always within his reach, either in his pocket or face down on the table. Shay noticed how he would get anxious whenever his phone vibrated, how he would quickly pick it up and walk out of the room to answer his calls when she asked who was calling. His answers were vague. Just work stuff or a church member needing advice. But here's the shocking part. Shay never heard him mention any names. It was always just someone from church or a colleague. Then there were the late-night messages. Pastor Khan's phone would light up in the middle of the night and he would rush to check it, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. When Shay asked why he was getting messages so late, he would say it was about church emergencies or community outreach programs, and Shay wanted to believe him. She really did. But this is where it gets interesting. When she looked at his phone bill, she noticed repeated numbers appearing at odd hours. Who was he texting at 2 a.m. and why didn't he mention it to her? But the craziest part was the social media behavior. Shay noticed that Pastor Kian became more active online, but not in the usual way. He stopped posting about their relationship. Gone were the sweet couple photos, the heartfelt captions, and the loving emojis. Instead, his post became more generic quotes about faith, work-related updates, and group photos. Where Shay was noticeably absent when she asked him about it, he shrugged it off, saying he was trying to keep his personal life private. But Shay couldn't help but wonder, who was he trying to hide their relationship from? This is where it gets even more suspicious. Shay noticed that Pastor Khan was spending more time on his phone, but whenever she walked into the room, he would quickly put it down or close whatever app he was using. He started taking his phone with him everywhere, even to the bathroom, which he never used to do before. And whenever she asked him who he was talking to, his answers were short and dismissive, almost defensive. He would change the subject, make jokes, or accuse her of being paranoid. But here is the shocking part. One day, Shay accidentally caught a glimpse of his phone screen and saw a message notification pop up from an unsaved number. It was a heart emoji. Her heart sank, but she didn't say anything. She wanted to confront him, but she also wanted to gather more evidence. She didn't want to accuse him without proof, so she decided to watch more closely. This is how the suspicious clues started piling up. Shay began to notice other inconsistencies. Pastor Khan's schedule became more unpredictable. He started coming home later than usual, claiming he had meetings or events to attend. But when Shay checked his social media tags, she noticed that he was at places he never mentioned. There were photos of him at restaurants, events, and gatherings that she knew nothing about. And what made this story different was that he was always surrounded by people she didn't recognize, people he never talked about. But here's the craziest part. One day, Shay saw a selfie of him with a woman she had never seen before. They were standing close, smiling and looking way too comfortable with each other. When she asked him about it, he laughed it off, saying she was just a fan from church who asked for a picture. But Shaunie's intuition told her otherwise. She could see the familiarity in their body language, the way they leaned into each other, and the way his eyes sparkled. It was more than just a casual photo. It was a clue, a piece of the puzzle that she couldn't ignore. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Shay noticed changes in his appearance. Pastor Khan started paying more attention to his looks. He began buying new clothes, wearing cologne more often, and getting haircuts more frequently. When Shay complimented him, he seemed surprised, almost caught off guard. He would say things like, "I just felt like changing things up," or "I need to look presentable for church events." But Shay couldn't help but wonder, who was he trying to impress? What makes this story even more compelling is how Shay tried to confront her suspicions. She didn't want to accuse him without proof, so she asked subtle questions, hoping he would be honest with her. But every time she asked, his answers were inconsistent. He would change his story, give vague explanations, or act annoyed, accusing her of being insecure. It was emotional manipulation, and Shay started to feel guilty for even questioning him. She began to doubt herself, wondering if she was just being paranoid, but deep down she knew something was wrong. Destiny took an unexpected turn when Shaunie decided to investigate on her own. She started checking his social media activity, looking for clues in his posts, comments, and tags. She paid attention to the people he interacted with, the events he attended, and the places he visited. She noticed patterns, names that kept appearing, locations that didn't match his explanations, and timelines that didn't add up. The more she investigated, the more suspicious she became. But here is the most shocking part. She discovered that he had a secret Instagram account, one he never mentioned to her. It was private and she couldn't access it, but the fact that he kept it hidden was enough to confirm her suspicions. This is where the story takes an emotional turn. Shay felt hurt, betrayed, and emotionally exhausted. She wanted to believe him, trust him, and hold on to the love they once shared, but the clues were undeniable and the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. She was torn between love and betrayal, hope and heartbreak. She didn't want to confront him without solid proof, but she also couldn't keep living with doubt and suspicion. The emotional pain was overwhelming, but it also gave her strength. Shay realized that she deserved the truth, no matter how painful it would be. She was ready to confront him, ready to demand answers, and ready to face the consequences. But the craziest part was that she still didn't know the full extent of his betrayal. The shocking truth was waiting to be covered, and Shay was about to find out that the suspicious clues were just the tip of the iceberg. This is how the suspicious clues led to a heartbreaking realization. It was about a woman fighting for the truth, facing emotional manipulation, and struggling to trust her own instincts. It was about deception, heartbreak, and the painful journey of uncovering betrayal. And as Shay prepared herself to confront Pastor Khan, one thing was clear. The clues were leading to a revelation that would change everything.